It's good to be back at the first official press briefing after Miss Irma visited us. Things have changed, and changed considerably. Prior to Irma, we normally had one member of the press at press briefings. And today, we have almost all of the representatives of the press in the room. So there must be a lot of queries that we can expect from the floor today. Irma, as I mentioned, has changed a lot of things. And one of the things that's changed is my budget. As you know, the budget 2017 has been approved by Parliament. It went through the entire process. But the projections and predictions contained in the budget 2017 no longer hold, thanks to Irma. Whilst prior to Irma, we were tracking with substantial surpluses. In fact, 2/3 of the income of the entire year had already been collected for 2017, and we had a surplus showing about 12 million guilders at the time. Heading towards December, we expected that we would have a very healthy 2017 financially. Irma made sure that that is not going to happen, and the reverse is now the case. The income projected between September and December has been reduced drastically because we no longer have the income or no basis to predict that the income we had projected will be there any longer. In fact, it's substantially reduced. Not only that, expenses, other than the expenses we had projected for September to December 2017, have increased substantially. In fact, when you do the tally, we will have approximately a deficit for 2017 of around 128 million guilders. So yesterday I submitted the revised budget for 2017 was presented to the Council of Ministers. It's now being discussed, and I expect to receive approval for that budget shortly. The deficits as projected in the 2017 budget can be covered. There are sufficient reserves that the deficits for 2017 can be handled. We immediately also started work on budget 2018, and that is a work in progress. And that also we can predict now for 2018 will show substantial deficits that needs to be covered somehow, and ways and means are being presently discussed to see how those deficits can be covered. It is almost certain that our ability to borrow, which is limited, will not be such that we will be able to cover all the deficits we expect to incur for 2017 and 2018. That some form of grants, we will have to look firstly towards the Netherlands and towards the rest of the world to see what grants we can obtain, which is quite normal under these circumstances for countries who have been devastated or ravaged by natural disaster, and loans. We will have to maximize the capacity we have to borrow. And we still have some room in terms of our assets. We still have assets, and those assets have value, and how we use those resources to be able to carry on is on the discussion, and we're seeking ways to deal with it effectively. Things after Irma is not going to be the same, unfortunately. We have less jobs, we have less businesses operating, and that has consequences. Consequences for people who are on the island, who no longer have jobs, who came here looking for jobs. And the question has to be, well, do we have sufficient means and ways to support them, give them welfare, or whether or not decisions have been made that probably is best to repatriate? Because the nature of the damages our infrastructure sustained is such that you can't build a hotel overnight. It's going to take a year or 2, 3 before those jobs come back. Jobs in the construction field will be aplenty. That's the main source of jobs we have right now. But we can't convert everybody overnight into construction workers. So a balance has to be found that we can live with, and that we can work with, and that we can finance. I know there are going to be a lot of questions, so let me not use up all of the time. Let me leave it here by these short comments, and the questions you'll have, we'll try to answer them afterwards. Thank you very much.
I could imagine it probably would have been a bit of a disappointment to the media if I didn't show up this morning. But I had no intentions not to be here. You can ask the other members from the council how I've been asking, when are we going to start back our weekly press briefing, because I miss you guys. So I'm happy that you're here this morning. And of course, again, on everyone's mind is the way forward post-Hurricane Irma. I would speak on a few items, such as where we are right now with the cleanup of the island. I think we are moving at a good pace. One of the main problems that we are facing right now is, now that the dust have settled, a lot of companies, a lot of homeowners, a lot of hotels, they are now cleaning and removing their debris. So now that government have already been through certain areas and removed garbage from side of the road, debris from side of the road, we see that it's all coming back again. So we will be informing the owners that they will have to get in contact with us at the time of their cleaning, when they have plans to do it, so that we can be present and we can work in connection with them to have the debris removed instead of it just being placed on the side of the road. But I think we are moving at a good pace. I mean, we have reached to sort of a snag now, because there's only one location where we are piling all of this debris. We have a crusher working 24 hours. We have a barge that will be coming in to remove almost 100,000 tons of the material, aluminum and zinc. So like I said, yes, I would want to put more pressure on the individuals, but I think we are moving at a pace that I can live with. Like again, I said there's room for improvement, but again, we can live with the pace. I want to thank the organization that made it possible that we receive the equipment from the Netherlands, the trucks, the backhoes, the excavator, the water trucks. Thank God, because that is exactly what was needed, and they came in just in time. And they are doing a good job at that back and forth. I know many of you all have seen them moving back and forth, the white trucks. And they have been working round the clock also. So like I said earlier, again, I'm pleased I can live with what is happening. I would like it to be done a little bit more faster, but I can understand the situation as it is right now. We have received a lot of calls, many calls concerning why is a O or a circle on my home, or why is a B on my home? What does it mean? And I know we put out a press release. It has also been in the newspaper, in the Herald also, but just again to inform people. Most of it is done, especially with the O, when you see, which means that the house is uninhabited, it's unlivable because of the severe damage of the property. So it's a concern of the Ministry of Rummy that more harm will come to individuals and residents if you live or stay in such a structure. So eventually it means that such a structure will have to be demolished or come down. And if you have a B, it means that severe structural damage has happened because of the hurricane to that apartment, to that home, to that property. However, with discussions and contractors and things can be built back on the property. So it's not to say that that one will have to be demolished, but it means that you may have to reinforce the rebars. It means you may have to change the rafters. It means you may have to add on to the columns, but the structure can be saved. So that's the meaning of the O and the B. But like I said, it has been in the newspaper. We did bring it out, but we still receive a lot of calls concerning what does it mean. And also, I believe on the minds of everyone, and I can tell you that also been on the minds of the Council of Ministers. And with that itself, I told them soon everyone would know what is being done. But it's not that it have been a secret or no information wasn't forthcoming. And I'm talking about the project that many people passed and probably saw an excavator perched on top of the hill. Let me try to get a correct name because the Minister of Education and Culture said it's time we start calling things by the proper name. So I think it's Colby and not KB, but it's the Bells property, and you can start calling it from now Bells Lookout Point. And that is where all the whole controversy, if I should use that word for lack of a better word, what we are talking about. It's a project that have been initiated way before Hurricane Irma, months before Hurricane Irma. It's in collaboration with the Bells family. I had a very long and interesting conversation convincing them as to why something should be done in that area. And I mentioned to the Council of Ministers that I remember Flag Day came and left St. Martin, and not one flag did we see up anywhere, or anyone knew at that time that Flag Day came and went. And I also made mention that I remember when I was a member of Parliament and I would travel to certain countries, and if it's one distinct image, symbol, you would always see when you travel to those countries is their huge, colossal, monstrous national flag of that country. And in my mind, it stuck out as something that sort of gave one that sense of pride, sense of nationalism, that listen, this is what we are all about. And I don't want to get into the details of what the cost of it was and what this was, but what I can tell you, and I know my PR is sitting there and she told me not to say it, and because she told me not to say it, I won't say it. But again, it is far midgets than what was made mention in the newspaper. Nothing to that at all. I can tell you we have salvaged the poles from the airport, which was donated. The concrete was donated. The steel work was donated. The excavating work was donated. And more as we go along, many other individuals and companies are coming on board because, They want to be part of it. I had UTS call me yesterday and ask, can we be the #1 carrier in terms of the Wi-Fi in that area? Can we attach an antenna? Can we do this? So, you know, those sort of things is what is happening with that project that is going on up on the hill. There are 3 components of it that is integral. We have 2 thus far, and there's 1 on the side of the family that we are waiting on that should be here on Friday. And I think by then, everyone would get a full scope of what this project is all about. However, I want to mention this, that when I received a call from Alita, and she wanted more information about what is happening, I told her, if you call me, which was 2 Fridays ago, because we knew that the flags were coming in at that time. I said, you call me on Friday, you will get the full exclusive and the story on my side of what all is happening. And we did not receive that call. And in our excitement of going to see these huge flags, we missed that communication in terms of me calling her, or, you know, from her side calling me. So it was never a matter of it being a secret or secrecy. It was just a matter of having a commitment with the family, and didn't want to bring out certain information at the time. And now, out of the 3 integral components, 2 are here, 1 should be here on Friday, and then everyone would eventually know what is happening. It's private property, you know, and like I said, I had a very interesting conversation convincing the family, and then they all came on board because they felt themselves that it is something that the country needs right now. And then again, you know, I always have to ask myself, when is a good time? I mean, do you need a specific time to hoist a flag in your country? Why should that be an issue that, oh, not this time, and this ain't the right time, and that ain't the right? There's never no right time but the time, which is always now or any time, because it's your country. And that is what you stand for. I mean, if it's within me, right, it would be huge and all over. It's a larger project than just what it is. It's one that's supposed to be coming at Fort Amsterdam. It's one that's supposed to be coming at Captain Hodge Pier. It's one that should be coming at in the Great Salt Pond. So it's not just one isolated incident. So when there's individuals that puts out a story to mislead and destabilize, I would go as far as to say, the government there is, because that's the ultimate goal. It is to really throw a monkey wrench in all that is going on, to make things look horrible, to make things look bad. But I can tell you one thing. Me, Christopher Emmanuel, I'm not going to throw not one of these ministers under the bus, especially the Prime Minister. And if it's in my power, he needs probably 6 months vacation for what he's doing and what he's going through. Yes, probably we didn't communicate faster. But what media did we have after post-Hurricane Edmund? What telephones were there? Newspapers was out. There was nothing. Everyone was busy moving back and forth, trying to get things organized. But I'll tell you one thing. Where we are today, in comparison to where Puerto Rico is, we have done well. And we are going to get better. We have done well, and we are going to get better. There's much more I can say, but I know time, and I know you want to ask a few questions. But don't let no one put doom and gloom in your minds. No one. Don't let no one make you believe as if things are not going to happen and it's not going to get done. Because not one of us are sitting here thinking that we don't have the best interests of the people in this country. Because we all do. Who ain't had 20 and 15 and 10 and 12 people in their homes, staying in their homes? We all had it. All of us did it. We went through a hurricane, a severe hurricane at that. And we stood the test of time. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to be here for the restart of our weekly press conferences. It is, again, another sign, another step towards returning towards normalcy. You know, I don't think it's necessary to recap, you know, everything that's happened since Irma. I have issued a statement about some of the activities But I do think it's very good to recognize the personal toll that the Category 5 plus hurricane has taken, and I call it Cat 3 looting, that the impact that it's had on the economy, on the island, but also the personal toll. You know, I see it every day. I see it as I walk around in the community. I see it as we work here within government. People are worried. People's tempers are very short. People are quick to snap at each other. It's a time actually when you actually see perhaps sometimes the people's real characters, those that are really, you know, who are so giving, so generous, so patient. I have to thank the staff around me because I know that I have not been the most pleasant person to be around since Hurricane Irma. I think it's also good to recognize, you know, compared to Hurricane Lewis, I remember it was several months before you could go out to a restaurant and get a hot meal and a cold drink. And I think that, you know, the people in the country are amazing. They're resilient. You see people, you know, immediately days after the storm already getting out, rebuilding, cleaning up. Clearly, the decisions that government have made in the past, the investments that have been made in terms of, in particular, putting our infrastructure underground, have paid off today. As Minister Avromi mentioned, I think it's also St. Thomas as well. You still see that, you know, a lot of their electricity lines were above ground, and they're paying for that now. The time that it's going to take for them to restore electricity is going to be tremendous. I still have many friends in the hospitality business, and you know, when I call to check and see how they're doing, you know, their hotels are still operating based on backup generators, and you know, in many senses of the word, I think St. Martin is recovering quickly. As a matter of fact, I think last night on Facebook, I saw a newspaper, I think it was a CNN article, a piece about how they were comparing some of the smaller islands, because so much attention's been put on Puerto Rico because, of course, we tend to get U.S.-centric news. And actually, they also recognize that St. Martin, in comparison to others, I think even compared to the French side, was recovering well. So, you know, in times like this, it's also important to recognize the positive things, good steps forward, and I think that St. Martin has a lot to be proud of. That said, you know, when you go outside, actually, if you just stand in front of the building and you see the line of people that are coming to government for help, for financial aid, for medical assistance, you know, we're doing the intake, and when you listen to some of the stories, there's still far too much hardship, struggling, pain out there, and that's something that I will come back to. A brief recap from the ministry's perspective. You know, I'd like to give Joy Arnell, acting SG, and Fenna Arnell a special gratitude. You know, they were in charge of ESFs 6 and 7, which means that immediately after the storm, they were 12 hours a day, every day here in the building. They ignored their personal situation to be here for the community, for government, to do their jobs. I know that that was very difficult, in particular for them, so I'd like to give a special recognition to them. But also some of the other department heads, Bernadette Berry, acting head for social development, Linda Froston, acting head for labor. By the way, we've had a number of meetings with the labor tripartite already to discuss how we're coming as a group with a consensus in terms of how we're managing the obviously changed labor market with the impact of Hurricane Irma. I think it's also good to mention that you know, we had a brief discussion about it yesterday in Council of Ministers. You know, you see a number of ads in the newspapers, you see a number of ads on Facebook where companies that are not established locally are already advertising, looking for clients. We caution people that the companies you're doing business with need to be registered in St. Martin, and we encourage that. Well, it's the law. But it also means that in terms of holding somebody accountable for their work, if they're a foreign entity, you have no grip on them. If they're a local entity, you have some legal recourses when something goes wrong. Special thanks to Ida Holloman. She's head of Community Development and Family Humanitarian Affairs, and she's also acting head of CPS. CPS has been very active trying to bring down the pests around the island. That's rodents, flies, mosquitoes. We are out of some of the chemicals. We're hoping that in some of the relief goods that are expected shortly, those chemicals will be coming shortly. To the ambulance department, Silred Richardson, I'm happy to report that the relief ambulance workers from Holland have arrived. Again, the ambulance department's been working as first responders, again, thinking about country first and, in difficult personal situations, and they've been working flat out since Hurricane Irma. So I'm happy that they have finally an opportunity to catch a breath. And by the way, I think it's important to recognize the Council of Ministers, and to my recollection, except for Irma, Jose and Maria, haven't had any time off either. From the beginning, we had 2 meetings a day and toned down now to 1 meeting per day in terms of as Council of Ministers, but a very dedicated group of ministers as well. Thanks to Earl Best, head of the inspectorate. He's been very active in spite of his office being pretty much leveled, both front and back ends of the office destroyed. But he's been very active out helping to make sure that, in particular, food is properly disposed of and that the food being sold in the supermarkets is safe to eat, and also spent a lot of time and attention in terms of the safety of our water supply. So just, and to all the rest of the staff within the ministry, I've seen them coming in. And by the way, we were on the 2nd floor here in the building. We had staff from other ministries as well show up and just say, look, I work for this ministry, but I'm here, where can I help? And so I think that the government has a lot to be proud of, a lot of civil servants that really came in, regardless of whatever their personal situations, and put country above self. So to all of them, a special thank you. Going forward, I've tried these days not to interfere with the activities of the ministry. Fact is, the ministry's been a member of the EOC. They have their plans, they have their strategies, and I've learned through my business life as well that very often the worst thing that a leader could do is come in and interfere with the process. The process has evolved over the years, and I think it makes sense for us to review, and I have requested that the EOC committees and the ESF committees 6 and 7, as well as I think Council of Ministers requested that the EOC do a review in terms of what went right, what went wrong, where are areas for improvement. It's important to remember we're still in the middle of hurricane season, so God forbid, but we need to be prepared and we need to learn lessons, institutionalize the things that we did well, and improve on the things that didn't go as well. The ministry is very busy in terms of making an assessment. I mean, it's the first step in terms of solving any problem is understanding the scope, the depth of the problem that we have. So the ministry is very busy with that. The ministry itself has lost a number of vehicles, office space, and also, of course, our staff have personal issues as well. I know as a leader, I'm supposed to be here instilling confidence and telling everyone that everything's going to be okay. And I think it's amazing, yes. People are very resilient. Nature's resilient. You see landscaping coming back. It is amazing. But I have to be honest. I think as a leader, you also have a responsibility to be clear with the people. I'm also very worried about moving forward. VSA in particular has a huge responsibility. The people in the community that are the most vulnerable, the sick, the unemployed, those in financial difficulties, end up at the Ministry of VSA. As Minister of Finance indicated, government's resources are finite, revenues are decreasing, and without money, the ministry is going to have a very difficult time taking care of the influx of people that are coming in. I know we're working diligently, and I assure you, the Council of Ministers and the Ministry of VSA will always put the needs of the people as a priority. And certainly I do. It gives me sleepless nights worrying about how we're going to take care of all the people that are showing up here at the building. But I want to assure the public, I want to assure the community that I'm working night and day on trying to find solutions for all of the problems now and the problems to come.
I like going a little later in the program, and I can hear and then avoid repeating a lot of what has been said, but I would like to add my words of gratitude to be back in this setting where we can regularly inform the general public about the actions of government. I believe no one can stand back and say that nothing has been happening, but many have complained about communication. So getting communication going on a regular basis has been our goal, and so we're very happy to be able to do so, as we have from the beginning of this government sitting been very open and transparent, and we hope to reachieve and of course surpass the levels of communicating that we had in the past. So thank you for your patience thus far, and we look forward to being able to keep you, as the people of St. Martin, completely abreast of all that we are doing, how it is being done, and making sure that it is being done in the most effective and efficient way possible. I would like to also take this time to thank the ministry. I think I did this in previous press briefings or press releases that were issued, but I must say that the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports and its stakeholders have proven to be truly resilient and a great example of St. Martin Strong. Thank you. You all know who you are. To go into the details would really take up too much time. I would like to inform the general public that even though a release was issued, the Division Public Education has officially moved to the Government Administration Building. As such, the Staff Bureau, the Departments of Education, Culture, Youth, Sport, as well as the other divisions, Study Financing and Educational Innovations, are all located on the 3rd floor. Some logistics are still being worked out in terms of being able to communicate in the old ways via telephone. They, of course, are still available via all email addresses and our websites, as well as our Facebook pages that we do keep updated on a regular basis. But there are also temporary numbers which will be shared with the general public to ensure that communication with our clients and stakeholders can continue in the most effective manner. Of course, as the last division to move in, we are still processing certain things for the division, so we ask, of course, the schools and the clients that we serve from the Division Public Education for your patience while we get that regulated. So in a subsequent broadcast or release, we will be releasing the contact numbers for each division, the divisions and department, of course, and the divisions that remain outside of this building are the divisions of inspection and exams, as well as student support services. And further information in terms of being able to reach them will also be shared, but they remain in their old locations for the time being. The Student Support Services Division of this ministry is organizing a free workshop. As you know, this is one of our most active divisions in terms of public engagement and meeting the needs where the care aspect is concerned. And I must highlight this division, especially post-Irma, in coming up with a care plan and a whole trajectory, including all psychosocial professionals on St. Martin, and really great collaboration also with the international organizations to make sure the care aspect of the returning to school project was properly executed. Of course, that is an ongoing project, and I do commend them for their leading role in that. But this workshop is applying to schools in the Netherlands. As you know, life continues, and we are back to normal where that is concerned, and that will take place on November 6, 2017 from 4 to 5 p.m. The workshop is open for students who are in the last 2 years of secondary school or recent graduates, and will be held at the Student Support Services office, which is located at the Amigo building across from the police station next to the Windward Islands Bank. This Applying to Schools in the Netherlands workshop is aimed at students from all sections of the diverse education system on St. Martin. Whether you come from vocational or academic track, Dutch or English language programs, there is information for you all, quite valuable information. So you're encouraged to be on time, register for the workshop as space is limited. And of course, if there are more registrants than needed, that subsequent workshops will be organized to be able to meet the need. So the workshop is from 4:30 to 5:30, as it's getting earlier, but you should be there to register by 5 p.m. Parents that are students that have questions should contact Student Support Services Division at numbers 543-1235, 543-1235. This number can also be used to register. From the Division of Education Innovations, another notice pertaining to some moving forward activities. September 6, 2017 will forever be a date embedded in our minds, just as September 5th was 22 years ago. However, in every bad situation, good always emerges, and the Hurricane Irma will provide new opportunities for St. Martin, especially for the children of St. Martin. The iStep group would like to stimulate the children of St. Martin to not only reflect on the experience of the hurricane that passed, but to look towards the future. So in its being an ICT project, we would like to involve students in a digital storytelling showcase or exercise. So we're inviting all schools to participate in the digital storytelling activity called I-Stepping 'Cause St. Martin Strong. You're asked to write a script, and the team will be coming by once the school has submitted the top 3 submissions to be able to digitally record this, and all the submissions should be in by November 1st. More information, of course, will be disseminated in writing on this to the press so that you can get all the details out, and of course, the schools will receive this information directly. We believe that it's an opportunity for growth for the country, and the vision of our youth in how this country should look will serve as an encouragement not only for them, but also for us as the general public of St. Martin. So I encourage the youth to use this opportunity to present your view of what St. Martin should look like in the future. On the subject of the University of St. Martin, I issued a press release as regards to that already, but yesterday in the Council of Ministers meeting, we were able to approve for the 10% subsidy, balance of the 10% subsidy for the years 2013-2014. Despite a very hectic agenda, I must thank the Council of Ministers for fast-tracking that advice. And of course, there will be some amendments to the decree whereby we have deviated from the need for the university to submit audited reports. However, it will not be that those reports are not going to be expected at some time in the near future still. In the meantime, we had requested and have received a business plan as well as a presentation which was made in August prior to Hurricane Irma in terms of the vision of the university moving forward, and as well as some other documents which I won't go into detail here. Some more information will be needed so that we as ministry can properly evaluate the way moving forward in being able to salvage, save the university. We do realize the strong influence it has on our community. It is not being ignored, if anyone would think that, but in order for the Council of Ministers to take a decision to allocate any new funds which were not budgeted for, we would have to have a proper advice moving forward, looking at all possibilities. So the department and the stakeholders within are working diligently to be able to come up with that, and so we ask some patience in that regard as we move forward. From the Culture Department, the Ministry of ECYS, together with the Monument Council, would hereby like to remind owners of designated monuments that monument permits are required with or without a building permit in order to conduct any restoration or repair works to your monument. This is a reminder because most monument owners know this. Several new sites have actually been uncovered during Irma, as a lot of the brush was blown away, and so those have to be registered as well. But any applications that are needed, monument form permit applications, can be picked up right here at the Government Administration Building between 8 to 12 and 1:30 to 5 at the Culture Department. The number to contact is 5340. Also, as a ministry charged with culture, we had been, prior to Irma, planning an extensive St. Martin Day month of celebrations, actually. What I can say is that the St. Martin Strong campaign, which is more a government-wide and private organization pushing the building back of St. Martin, pushing that we are getting ready to move forward and welcoming visitors, is collaborating together with the Culture Department as well as this ministry. And we have a very extensive press conference which will happen after this press briefing, because the information would be way too much for us to go into at this point. But we will be sharing in a press conference the information of the St. Martin Strong campaign, which includes the St. Martin Day activities. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. I look forward to any questions you may have, and you're remaining afterward, of course, to take part in the press conference as we speak on promoting St. Martin in its entirety. Thank you.
It is a pleasure to be back in the weekly press briefing. It is already 11 o'clock, so I won't take up too much of your time. I would just like to, join in welcoming the members of the media back for the weekly press briefing, and hope that we won't be interrupted as the reconstruction of the building starts to take shape in the next couple of weeks. We have had quite some damage on the top floor, and we have had some damage on the bottom floor because 2 windows in the back here blew out. The wind that came in wreaked quite some havoc. So the building, particularly the top floor, the Prime Minister has no office. I was sheltered by my colleagues, Minister of Finance and Minister of Justice. They share a small conference room, and they have made that available for the Prime Minister for the time being. But my entire cabinet basically is without an office at this point in time, and they need to find shelter somewhere else in the building, and that makes working even more difficult. One of the main topics of discussion all these days, and it continues to be complicated as we move along. We have the leader of the UP party that came to Parliament and said, this is not the time to play politics with the interests of St. Martin. We are here to support the government in whatever they would want to accomplish for the people, and then turn around and, like a thief in the dark, backstabbing the government for political reasons. This is not petty. People are saying, and as I read some of the things that are being posted, it is like, stop holding the St. Martin people hostage and give in, rather than telling the Dutch, stop holding the St. Martin people hostage for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with granting aid to St. Martin. Later today, after this press briefing, I will have a conference call with one of the directors of the EU to discuss the way forward as far as aid pertains to aid for St. Martin. On Thursday, I will be receiving the Deputy Consul of China, who on behalf of the government, I think it is, will make a small contribution to the recovery of St. Martin. We have others who are showing interest in assisting St. Martin. This is about aiding and assisting St. Martin. If we have issues as it pertains to the integrity chamber, this should not be brought into this discussion today to blackmail the government or to hold the people of St. Martin hostage, and then to have local politicians playing into it and saying that there's nothing wrong. There is everything wrong with holding the people and holding the government hostage, dangling the carrot, dangling a bag of money, and then what makes it even, I wouldn't say more laughable, but it is, there will be no discussion whatsoever on any amount, so you should go blindly into accepting a deal, accepting demands on the part of the Dutch government, but you don't even know what it is you are going to get. That St. Martin needs aid is clear. That the St. Martin people are resilient is also clear. But it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate that the propaganda that was run this morning, again, I was looking at some interviews. I don't know whether it was fake news or it was something fabricated, but supposedly interviews, and I don't know whether it was meant as people depicting how ridiculous it could be or would be. But all the answer the reporter is getting from the persons that were being interviewed, it looked like it was somewhere in the second chamber it was taking place. It was like, yeah, but we can't send Holland. St. Martin is a mafia island. St. Martin is a corrupt country. St. Martin is this. St. Martin is that. So that image that has been created is not one about the government, because nobody can point their fingers at this government and say, oh, these are corrupt people. But when you try to label the people of St. Martin or St. Martin as a corrupt country, you're labeling all of the people. When you have no confidence in our courts, you have no confidence in our ombudsman, you have no confidence in our audit chamber, then you are saying something about all of us. And it is a fight that we collectively should have. And I'm not telling the people of St. Martin that government has no heart for their suffering. Yes, government has. And government is busy working out the details of the way forward. Because it is just a few weeks ago that we have been hit by the worst hurricane ever recorded in history. And here we are, like Minister Lee just pointed out, restaurants are open, bars are open. When I'm saying restaurants and bars, people can go out. People can enjoy themselves. There are many who still have jobs that they can go to. We are rebuilding the economy, but we need help in rebuilding the economy. And then while we are flat on our backs, to put a gun to the head of the politicians and tell them, we won't move an inch unless you give in. As far as the integrity chamber is concerned, I want to put that up front again. There is nothing we have to hide. The integrity breaches in this country are no different. And they may be different, yes, indeed, that they are this compared to that in other parts of the kingdom. But they are being dealt with. The courts are prosecuting people. The detectives are carrying out investigations. The latest that we've had are people who not were looting, people who were stealing, who broke into businesses after the hurricane. There are dozens of arrests that have already been made. So the system is working. Where we have had immigration officers at the head of immigration that did wrong things, they were dealt with, and the list is not no long list, but there's a list of persons and situations that have been dealt with. So to continue to point your finger at St. Martin as if we can't give them money because the money is going to disappear. One of the clips that I saw today is, it can end up just like with Haiti, where 8 million disappeared and only 4 homes were built for it. I mean, when you want to compare St. Martin to a situation like that, which I don't even think happened, but when you want to make it appear that if you send millions to St. Martin, it is going to disappear. Holland has been sending money to St. Martin for years. not over the past years since we became country St. Martin in 2010, but even after that, we have had the USONA funds. Nobody in government was getting the money. The money wasn't going to the finance minister to spend. The money was given to USONA. USONA overlooked the projects, and the projects were funded accordingly. We have EU that sends money. They don't send it, like I asked the minister on Sunday when we had an interview, when we had a telephone conversation. I said, you're making it sound like cash, black bags with cash is going to be coming to St. Martin, and therefore we can be held up. People are going to rob the government, or people are going to steal from the government. I mean, they're making it sound so simplistic, as if it's a corrupt gang. They're going to say we want $5 million for housing. They're going to stick $4 million in their pockets. The Dutch Audit Chamber, we have invited them. We have told the Dutch, you can send your audit chamber to audit any flow of any amount of funds that come here. The process to approve a project is in their hands. They decide how much they will spend on a project, if they will fund the project at all. Instead of having a sit down with the government of St. Martin like we have offered, like we have asked, no, there won't be any discussion unless Minister Plaster get his way, because he did not get his way with the integrity chamber that he had been fighting for since 2015. Again, in closing, I want to say the government, and for sure not this Prime Minister, is against an integrity chamber. We have already drafted the law. The law already went to the Council of Advice. Actually, yesterday, we received the advice back from the Council of Advice. So the process is moving forward. Now, to abort that process and say, if you are not completed by the 31st of October, we will take measures into our hands. That is not the way we are supposed to work with each other in this kingdom, because the kingdom has 4 countries. And the 4 countries are Holland, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin. We have our own obligations. The kingdom have its obligations, but you can't cross over into the responsibilities of St. Martin, hijack them simply because we were hit by a hurricane. And then to have local politicians joining in with them and making it sound as if the government of St. Martin is holding the people hostage because they may have something to hide. That is absolutely not, because every one of the ministers making up this Council of Ministers was subjected to a screening, and they have passed the screening. One other thing I want to react to, I didn't react to it, I was in Miami when I saw it, I never got to react to it. In one of the first statements, the leader of the UP said that it took, William Ireland is to be blamed for the looting because it took him 2 days to sign the state of emergency so that the looting could have stopped. That is absolutely not true, absolutely not true. Because the Marines were asked to be here. We have asked for the Marines to be here before the hurricane. They came here and were here before the hurricane. We had 150 Marines here before the hurricane. And they did not need to wait on no state of emergency for them to do something to prevent the looting. That is absolutely not true. And for the leader of the UP to play such cheap politics and enforce the criticism in Holland as if we and the Prime Minister did something wrong here, that is such cheap politics over the backs of the people of St. Martin, because it is absolutely not true. As I indicated, I have a conference call with the EU shortly, so unfortunately I won't be around too long for any questions. So if there are any questions for me, ask them like now, so I would be leaving in the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
To Minister Gibson, if I should use the terminology, would you say that your finance have been shattered? And as the Prime Minister said, there are opportunity to borrow. As he said, shortly, he's gonna be having a meeting shortly. The opportunity is now open to get finance from donors and other agencies around the world. Is the opportunity open for St. Martin to borrow, to get monies from companies, donors from around the world?
Thank you for the question. St. Martin always has the opportunity, and not opportunity, but the capacity, the right to borrow based on the CFT laws as long as its budget was in balance. And we have borrowed. In August, we borrowed some 21 million guilders, which is in the bank, based on the fact that the budget was balanced, and it was announced also when the budget was passed by Parliament. So our capacity to borrow has always been there and still is there. We can borrow, just as you probably know Aruba did, on the open market, but we have an arrangement with the Netherlands that we can borrow at very attractive rates from the Netherlands if the Netherlands write in to the bonds that we're seeking to generate for borrowings. So if the question is, do we have the ability to borrow? The answer to that question is yes, we do. But borrowing has a limit, has a ceiling. You cannot borrow unlimited amount of money. Same way when you go to a bank, the bank would question you, well, do you have assets? How are you going to repay? How long are you going to take to repay? And based on that information, the bank will make and weigh whether or not you can borrow or you are qualified to borrow the amount that you want. Given the enormous amount of losses we're going to suffer with an economy that has actually shrunk and which will take a couple of years to rebuild, and it's questionable if all of the money that we need, given the situation as it is and the expenses which we have, we can qualify to borrow all that money. And the answer to that is no. No country, when it's struck by a hurricane, as devastating as Irma it was, have economies, not in the Caribbean, that can borrow 100% of the money that it needs. Normally, it borrows up to its capacity, the ceiling that it has, and it qualifies, on recommendation of everybody, for grants. So between the borrowing and the grants, you will cover your expenditures. But of course, you have to go through the entire process of trying to limit your expenses as much as possible and trying to increase your income as much as possible, besides just simply borrowing and continuing to spend the same way you used to spend before. So there's a lot of work has to be done to look and see what's the most efficient way to go about borrowing and managing our expenditures and qualifying from other countries, including the Netherlands, for loans and grants.
Thank you very much for your question. Lyndon Andrew Dick, the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning to the Council of Ministers. We start off with Minister Lee. Concerning shelters, you've been very quiet concerning people who've lost their home Also, people who ask for social assistance. Can we get some numbers? How many people lost their homes? How are the shelters doing now? How many people are using it? Just a roundup of the shelter situation on the island.
You've asked the question a number of times.
No
And
answer.
my apologies, yes, the department's in the process of compiling numbers as soon as we have a better idea. There's a discussion also, you have to understand, between shelters and emergency housing. So there's a bit of a discussion between VROMI and VSI in terms of, because the emergency housing needs to be prepared by VROMI. So in the shelter, I don't know the up-to-date numbers, and so I would hate to give you a false number, but the number is decreasing, the people that are in the shelters right now.
Thank you very much. Andrew, Hilbert Haar, stmartinnews.com. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Minister Lee. I read in the National Recovery Plan that the plans for the new hospital have to be adjusted, and that is now not going to cost 75 but $100 million. Does it have any consequences for the local finances of that project, like SZV? Will they still be able to stay on board with those numbers?
Sure, that's a good question. As you know, we were originally speaking with two possible local financiers, SZV and APS. SZV has obviously been hit hard by Irma as well. The number of business closures and the payouts that they need to allocate resources to is obviously going to impact their financials. We have revised our request to the Netherlands, and that request has already been forwarded. And the idea is that the hospital, don't quote me on the number, but I think it was about rated to 160, around there, in terms of miles per hour. That was the original design criteria for the hospital. Obviously, Hurricane Irma has redefined those criteria points. And so now we're looking and saying, you know, look, originally I think it was going to be some sort of a wall paneling system. And so we are looking at changing it to a concrete structure, which means the construction time is longer, which means that the costs would be higher. We've given the Netherlands a number of different possible solutions. Our request, that I believe is the most reasonable, is to continue with the request for the soft loan for the original $75 million and ask them for a grant for the difference, which we anticipated is between $20 to $25 million, to upgrade the structure to a Cat 5 plus structure, right? A hospital is, I think, out of one of the critical infrastructure buildings, one that you want to be sure is there after a storm like this. And obviously, the stronger the storm, the more you need the hospital. So that's the proposal that we've submitted to Holland. And internally, we are looking at, you know, how can we, in the event Holland does not support, how would we adjust the project? And one possibility that we're in discussions is perhaps, you know, it was going to be the sort of a rectangular structure where the empty space is, demolish the old building and then build sort of a wing to add to the structures. Though ultimately the structure was going to be sort of an L-shaped. So what we're considering is it possible to eliminate the wing and take the savings from that and upgrade the structure so the hospital would then become a little bit smaller but upgraded to Cat 5 plus standards. And you know, it's a slightly different subject, but since it just reminds me, you know, just a message to the community to be careful. Actually, I don't have numbers, just anecdotal stories, Andrew, sorry. But we've certainly seen a lot of people coming in with injuries after the hurricane, right? So in other words, the actual injuries during the hurricane is one thing. But what we're seeing is a lot of people getting up and trying to fix their houses, understandably, but they're going on roofs that aren't secure. I'm hearing stories of people falling off, you know, 2-story, 3-story buildings because they're not using proper safety equipment. This is something that we've spoken about with the ministry because it falls under the inspectorate, the occupational safety. But, you know, remember there's glass and nails on the beach, so careful walking barefoot, but especially people that are, you know, understandably trying to improve the situation around their house. Just be careful. We're getting actually more, in my opinion, anecdotally more complaints about people injuring themselves after the hurricane and trying to repair their homes. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilbert. Judy Fitzpatrick, Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to all the ministers present. I'd just like to follow up on the question asked by my colleague. With all of the changes now, based on our new situation, what is your new projection for when the hospital, do you think it would still happen within this governing term?
I think so. The original feedback that I've received, remember, I've been working on the financing via the Netherlands for over a year already. And the process was fairly far in terms of two parallel tracks, the local financing as well as via the Netherlands. And the initial feedback has been very positive, recognizing that as part of the recovery process and building back better, obviously a hospital that's built to Cat 5 standards is critical. And remember, the same hospital services Seba and Statia, so the Netherlands have a direct interest in seeing that a quality hospital is built. So I am optimistic. We are speaking to other financiers as well, with the possibility of splitting, let's say, the proposed loan between SZV and APS, perhaps bringing in a third party to reduce their exposure or their need for cash. So I am still optimistic. The project makes sense, and there isn't a person in the community, I think, who doesn't recognize the need for a new hospital. So
The 10% that was owed, basically in the subsidy ordinance, once you've issued a subsidy, they're determining you either get 80 or 90%. In this case, the university gets 90% of its subsidy over a year, so divided in 12 increments, or depending on their agreement, maybe all the way up front. I'm not sure exactly which arrangement was made for them, but thereafter, there is the obligation of the entity to report in a timely fashion and submit certain reports to account for that fund before the balance, 10% in this case, is released. So, as I informed, the 10% was requested. The report was sent unaudited. Based on the circumstances, we agreed as a Council of Ministers to grant the 10% for those 2 years. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but 2014 was higher than 2014 was higher than 2013, so it's not equal amounts. And in correspondence from the university, they were indicating that they needed it to meet payroll at the end of this month. So that was confirmed, or will be confirmed via the official correspondence to them. I don't think I should be corresponding to the general public before the university receives it in hand.
You had mentioned that a company was coming on the island to take care of the garbage. Now we have seen there's an influx of garbage, and you also open up a new site to dump the garbage. Is this company still coming? And I realize that the present company restart operation. Shortly, we're going to see something happen rapidly with the garbage that are piling up on the island.
Your questions has freaked me out. I mean, but it's all right. Like I mentioned earlier, we have reached to a stage, yes, where we had to open a second dump site because I made it clear that on the present landfill, no post-hurricane debris or garbage should be put there. I don't recall or remember the company that you mentioned. I don't know if you mean the EnviroGreen, the waste to energy. I don't know which one there is. But like I mentioned earlier, there is a badge that is coming in. We already had one that left, and they're coming back to remove most of the aluminum, zinc, and crushed material. We have the crusher that is there right now working 24 hours. That is crushing. We are waiting on some balers because, again, we don't want to We don't want to lose all the garbage, and let me explain why. It adds to the caloric value that will be needed for whichever waste and for the waste to energy. What we need now at the present moment is the balers that's going to take this garbage and bale it and store it. I don't know if you understand the process, which means it will make good burning value for the waste to energy that can produce energy. But yes, we will be moving out majority of the debris that is there right now because we simply have nowhere else to put it. We did create the second site, but that's a site, I believe, that was given to the Soccer Association and others. You know, it's just like when we were using the land, the parking lot in Simpson Bay, that was temporary. We was also using across from the movies, that was temporary. Was using Jose Lake parking lot, the ball field, that was temporary. So they all had to be removed, sanitized, cleaned up, and that is the location where we are at right now, yes.
Thank you very much, Lyndon. Andrew.
Minister Emmanuel, about the road network. I see that you mentioned garbage collection and so on, but the road network, what's the status of the road network? I mean, I know we've seen it, but as far as repairing and so on.
Yeah, we had a discussion yesterday in terms of starting back where we left off pre-Hurricane Irma, especially with the markings on the road, paintings on the road, doing the hard servicing, patching the holes. So again, like I mentioned, Hurricane Irma really turned things upside down. So if you were planning and you had your idea, your vision on moving left, now all of a sudden you have to move left, right, in the middle to get back on track where you were before, because roads that were simply had 2 holes now have 8, 9, and 12 holes. So it's not a patching anymore, it's a whole resurfacing that one would have to do, and that takes up budget, that takes up advice, that takes up different things now that has to be done. It's not just going, taking a truck and filling a hole anymore. It's a process that needs to be done. So, it is still there. We are going to start back that process because, like I said, the main objective first was to secure the cleaning, movability of the main roads, that we had access to move about. And that has been done. But what we are seeing now is more garbage is coming out on the main road, and we have to put a stop to it as soon as possible.
Is there any, could you give any indication what kind of assets the government is thinking about selling?
I did not say government is thinking about selling any assets. What I said was that our borrowing capacity is one that is limited by your ability to repay, which you repay from income, and your assets which you have, which also have values. Those values of those assets could be used, if needed, by selling the assets. We have government-owned companies, we have buildings. I mean, it's just like any private citizen. If the moment come in their lives that they need to attract funds, that they would look at their income and then look at their assets, see what assets they would like to dispose of or put up as some form of security in order to attract funds. I'm just saying that in general, but not that so that government has discussed it or that any decision in that respect has been made. No, it's only in general explanation that when you reach your limit with your cash, that there are other assets you could look at also in a critical position to be able to attract more funds.
Thank you. Hilbert, Judy.
Thank you, Minister Gibson. You mentioned in your opening remarks that St. Martin, we have sufficient funds to cover the deficit projected for this year. Can you kindly give us an indication as to what we have in our coffers?
Yes, I want to be cautious and careful as far as that is concerned because, as I said, we have submitted a budget, and that budget still needs to be approved by the Council of Ministers. So one cannot just automatically assume that the budget that I have submitted is going to automatically be approved. But we've got funds in reserve. We have funds that we've borrowed that I mentioned earlier to the tune of 21 million guilders for capital investments that you probably would have to defer. We have funds that we owe that probably also could be deferred in order to have and defer to other purposes than originally was the case. Those are the funds that we have in cash right now that we're looking at, and we're making certain suggestions in order to cover those deficits, including the normal ability we have to borrow on the normal circumstances.
Thank you very much, Judy. Let's begin our last round of questions. Stephen?
Mr. Jacobs, on a lighter note, have you received a status report as it pertains to the various sports facilities on the island?
Status report has been received from all 4 departments in the sense of the facilities, etc. The ministries right now actually have seen just the email passing by of a comprehensive report that would cover the entire ministry. So it's included in that. So we have received it, and it's all going forward in the sense of what we need to be able to rebuild, etc. So that has just, it's been received, but it has not been processed as such. We're still dealing with that. But we have the numbers in terms of how many of our facilities are damaged, etc. What has been a challenge is to actually put a financial figure to that. So hopefully in this final draft, or one of the drafts that I've received now, which I just saw actually on my inbox, we'll be able to go into that and get a better financial picture of the total damage with the facilities within our ministry.
Thank you, Stephen. Lyndon?
Question to Minister Lee. I have seen a lot of rodents, roaming on the island. I haven't seen a lot of flies, but there are a lot of mosquitoes. Do you have any planned shortcoming to take care of fogging?
Thanks, Lyndon. There actually was fogging activities already immediately after the storm. As I mentioned in my statement, they didn't have sufficient chemicals to continue. We are waiting for shipments to arrive, and they will continue with the fogging, as well as the ministry also distributes bait for rats as well. So, but I encourage residents to be proactive. You know, the same messages that were out there before the storm still apply, you know. And as a matter of fact, all the garbage now on the side of the roads just has created a lot more breeding sites. So again, the message goes out to the community, try and, clean up the breeding sites as much as possible. But, and then the other thing is that the storm has also impacted, for example, the bat community birds. So the sort of natural predators for some of the pests aren't around, and so that's also, I think, contributing to increased numbers, and I assume that will start to balance out. But yes, the ministry has ordered more chemicals. We're waiting for them to arrive.
Thank you very much. Lyndon? Andrew?
Yes, Minister Jacobs. Concerning the pavilion tent expected to be placed at the old Prince Alexander School, close to it at least. Of course, just to ease the minds of those in the area, some concerns was of the reason why it was broken down, the asbestos situation. So can you tell us a little bit that they have nothing to worry about in that sense?
Okay, I did hear that question being raised somewhere, but it didn't come officially, so unfortunately, I didn't address it before, so my apologies to those that may have put that out there. There are 3 pavilions that have been received by the ministry through the Ministry of OCW in the Netherlands. It includes, of course, furniture and it had also included air-conditioned units, paneling, etc. inside to separate for 6 classrooms each. As I mentioned before in press releases, they were designated one for CBA, which is at the Ring Road, one for the Mac High, which is on a property adjacent to the Mac High, and the St. Martin Academy having no property close by and not being able to use the location itself. We're busy with the reconstruction of the Prince William Alexander School, which is a huge lot, and it's only the first phase being built at this time. So it was determined after many site visits within the area to utilize, of course, it's always better to use government-owned property to avoid long discussions, etc. So this property was determined. There is no asbestos at the property. When the property was not initially demolished because it had asbestos, but because there was a plan to better utilize the space. It was an old building. Asbestos was found after, and it was disposed of, regulated, inspected, and I'd have to check with Vromi exactly where, but it's no longer at the property at this point. And so the place is deemed safe for rebuilding, for reuse, and that's why we are actually actively building the Prince William Alexander School there. That's in process on part of the property. So an access will be made for the St. Martin Academy students over the gutter that is there, for them not to go necessarily through the path around, but to go directly into the Prince William Alexander property from their schools and be able to make the commute to be able to continue with their classes, as they lost quite some classrooms and are doing some shifts. I thank you for that question, because I neglected to update that we are having our last emergency recovery for education meeting with the school boards on Friday upcoming, after which I will then be able to give a better update in terms of the real situation, as most schools were now able, or all schools were able to, of course, besides USM, get in by October 16th, which had been the final deadline date. So I'll be able to, after Friday's meeting, be able to compile, and if we can't wait until Wednesday's press briefing, you will receive this in writing in terms of the update as to how school is running, how they're making up their schedules, et cetera, et cetera. You're welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Hilbert?
Minister Jacobs, I spoke with Dr. Francio Guadalupe yesterday, and he gave us one of the reasons why he has submitted his resignation, the lack of a law on tertiary education. My question is that law a work in progress? Is it there at all?
I think I'd like to address the first part of your statement. For the general public, Mr. Guadalupe had a 3-year contract which would end in December. So that university is now at this stage. I believe their presentation, if my mind or memory serves me correctly, in August was heralding the how you say, the achievement of the goal for which he was hired to receive accreditation for certain programs, which they claim they have, and which, as I said before in my statement, that we requested the actual documentation of such. So even though that presentation was made, the ministry had not officially received the documentation to substantiate those claims. So that, I believe, has been included in the package I received. Yesterday, I have not been able to go through that. It's quite a few documents. So to state that the reason for the resignation is due to the tertiary law not being ready, I believe if that is his reason, then that is his reason, and I cannot address that. When I entered into this seat, the tertiary law had been scrapped, that was being worked on. So there had been a draft which I believe the university was under the assumption would be finalized this year, and I guess they had not been informed that it had been completely scrapped, because in the meeting we held last October 11th, that was made clear to them that the law was, and I had made that statement before, I believe in June, when we projected our trajectory for pending legislation that was on our priority list, and we'd also sent it on to Parliament. That law was always on there, and I had updated, somebody had asked a question, where we were with that law at the time. So it is in the process, but it has been restarted completely because it had been rejected in the state that it was the last time. So if that is the reason that the Honorable Dr. Guadalupe is resigning from the university, then that is his prerogative, but do know that it is only shy of, 2 months that his contract would have ended. Of course, he had the prerogative to renew that, as did the university, but I've also heard claims that the university is closed. I've heard claims of all of that, but I have not received any of that in writing. So we are doing our utmost as government to make sure that especially the students and staff, because this is another economic pillar as well, government not only provides subsidy to the university, but we also encourage and have put policies in place that students are mandated when receiving our financing to go there for 2-on-2 programs in collaboration with other universities. And so we feel very responsible for those students who we have practically, some of them, had to force them to go there. You know, so it is not only from one perspective that this ministry has to look at this situation, this challenge, and we are looking at all our stakeholders internally, we are looking at external, but in some respects we must realize that this university is, besides meeting a social economic need for this country, an opportunity for our citizens to improve and grow, it is also a business. So we need to ascertain the real reasons why we are going through this process at this particular time, from a business perspective from the university. And so a lot of clarity is needed for the total picture to be understood, as this is literally one of the icebergs for which only the top is visible. And we are slowly discovering many of the underlying reasons for what may or may not be taking place right now.
Thank you very much. Hilbert, Judy.
Minister Jacobs, you mentioned in your press release yesterday that while it was not possible to increase the subsidy at USM at the moment, several scenarios could have been explored. My question is, have any steps been taken to explore any of those scenarios at the moment?
Right, and I saw, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I saw the headline and I'm like, okay, no funding possible. That's just based on law. And I must say though, in a discussion that we had, not very short discussion, not as long as I would like to, within the Council of Ministers, several ministers, even though in the past it might be difficult to share budget, expressed that they would, if necessary, be willing to assist in this area. When I said several scenarios are being looked at, that's why I also mentioned to your colleague just now, we need more information, because there are many ways, the old people say, to skin a cat, and so we will see which is then the best and most feasible option at this time. So we are currently, that's why I explained, looking at these many options, and as we look at them, we realize that maybe more information is needed, and so almost on a daily basis, we're sending for information. And USM is also taking part in our stakeholder meetings, which we've been having since Irma, as one of the quote-unquote school boards that are receiving subsidy from us, and so they'll be in a meeting on Friday as well, I assume. They have been in all of them. And so the thing about it is that operating with a gun to the head is a bit difficult. And so the deadlines that had been set by the university, we could not adhere to. I cannot, as minister, sign off for a $3 million increase ad hocly, and especially in a case where we are now seeing a decrease in our income. So we have to decide what is the best way to be able to assist the university, but we cannot, if you cannot properly manage and the 850 million thousand, that you're receiving, and I cannot submit an audited report, it would be very not business-wise smart of government to just increase it without many other conditions. Now, we're talking about conditions to receive aid. This, for us to be able to increase a subsidy, there's a process. If we're going to do a recovery emergency assistance, there's also a process. But accountability and conditions will have to be set for that. And to do that, we have to understand the construct, the structure of the USM, the NV, the endowment foundation, et cetera, and as more information comes out, the whole, every scenario will get a different look. So it's not something that we can solve by the 20th of October, as had been asked by the university. But it has our priority, and we are working on it diligently.